and the whole crowd is going absolutely wild over the latest news from the massive tournament that left everyone speechless. Then the event host announces that only one incredibly tough fighter managed to make it all the way to the end. Right after that, the stage completely lights up while the crowd cheers loudly, begging for the lead to start already. Then the big screen displays the final list of the top players who were fighting for first place. But the grand champion lifts her golden trophy, which shines brightly under the lights of that massive arena. We see some incredibly strong fighters using super destructive powers to take down their enemies. After that, our champion enters a high-tech booth to connect directly to the server. Except that moment was her farewell to the amateur league before she started playing as a professional. And with a victorious smile, she kind of asks who will be able to achieve all this success in the future. Then 6 years pass, and we see a massive, modern commercial building standing out against the sky. Next, a boy goes to a super modern tech clinic that houses virtual gaming pods. At that exact moment, the pod begins to open very slowly, revealing the boy lying inside. Because of that, the doctor looks closely at him and asks how he is feeling after this test. But the head of research for the company smiles happily upon seeing that the whole test turned out perfectly in the end. Then the dark-haired boy mentions that the dizziness he feels right now is much less than before. So he gets up from the machine and says that his body feels much lighter than it used to. At that, the scientist calls the young man closer so she can show him some really cool information, and she points to the tablet, explaining that the new pod has been upgraded all the way to its maximum level. But she also explains that this top-tier technology allows even people with disabilities to play. Then the doctor puts the young man at ease, telling him that he can enjoy the experience for a while. So the young man gets a bit hesitant and asks what the total price would be for that device. At that moment, she reveals with a huge smile on her face that the machine costs about 100 million won. Then the boy completely freezes when he hears that price, which was absurdly high. But the scientist catches his despair and already knows that the guy's bank account is nearly empty. So she makes a very good special offer and asks if he would like to hear what the plan was. With that, we see that the virtual gaming device has become the biggest craze among people all over the world. At that moment, an artificial intelligence studies how people's minds adapt to the online game. Then, a very brave warrior delivers a super powerful aerial strike right to the head of a massive monster. But the sword attack cuts the creature with perfect precision, causing the massive monster to drop instantly. Then the swordsman runs incredibly fast, focused on showing that the game's realistic gameplay is amazing. Then a boss fight message pops up on the screen, showing the great danger the player is about to face. At that instant, he takes his sword and faces a massive shadow knight riding a horse. With that, the fight begins, sending sparks flying as awesome sword techniques cut through the air. But the young man smiles super excitedly to be completely immersed in that intense and wild battle. Then we see that thousands of people choose different professions within that virtual world. So the young man remembers the day he simply passed out inside the machine due to a system glitch. At that moment, the system warned that his brain synchronization rate was only 10%. And with that, he rides the bus, remembering that his low mental rate ruined all of his plans. But the young man watches several videos online about the secrets of the most modern pods of all. At that, he feels quite sad, knowing that all that money, 100 million, is way out of his reach. Then he puts his chin in his hand, looking very thoughtful, wondering why he still insists on playing again. At that moment, the blue bus continues its path through the city, while the boy goes on with his doubts. And as night falls on the city, we see the building where our protagonist is currently living. But the living room television is broadcasting the professional championship, with several records being broken right there. Then the dark-haired boy's roommate watches everything while eating snacks, going crazy over the match. So our hero enters the living room and asks his friend why the television is making so much noise. At that moment, the screen shows the announcement of an epic fight featuring the legendary champion against a new challenger. And because of that, the two young men sit on the floor to talk about the massive success of the championship, but his friend gets annoyed by the dark-haired boy's lack of knowledge about that super-famous game. Then the official tournament logo shines on the screen, highlighting the grand competition being broadcast live. Then the commentator explains that the event is reaching an incredible milestone of 15 million people. Then the grand champion lifts his golden trophy, which shines incredibly bright in front of the packed arena. At that moment, the young man wonders what kind of equipment professional players use in their fights. Then his roommate says that there are mage and archer classes to choose from in the game, but he makes it very clear that using a good old-fashioned sword is still the best option to win fights. At that, the protagonist becomes thoughtful after hearing the tips and starts considering his options. Then the friend starts eating his snacks and shares that he was eliminated from the league last year. At that moment, the guy chokes when the dark-haired boy asks if any streamer can enter the competition. With that, the snacker snaps in anger and yells that only incredibly famous players manage to get a spot. But he soon finds the question strange, since his friend has never been interested in gaming live streams. Then the young man's phone starts vibrating on the table, catching his attention with a message. So the hero picks up the phone, very curious to read what was written in that work message. At that instant, the screen shows the text from the scientist, asking if he has already decided on the proposal. And the doctor had promised that the tournament would give away one of those modern booths as the grand prize. But she also explained that if he accepted the challenge, things would become much easier for him. At that, the doctor offered to lend him the gaming machine for free until the whole championship was over. So she smiles, waiting very anxiously for the young man's final answer regarding that huge opportunity. At that moment, the roommate keeps eating and jokes, saying that he wanted to go to the lead too. Then the snacker almost chokes again when he hears the super serious response from his friend next to him. But the dark-haired boy calmly repeats that he truly wants to enter the competition of that major tournament. Then he gives a super confident smirk, sure that he would do very well in the battles. So the partner is left completely at a loss for words and stares at the young man with a shocked face. At that moment, the friend makes fun of the situation, asking if the event turned into a contest for just anyone. With that, the hero fixes his gaze, very determined, remembering the real reason he wants to play again. But he secretly wishes to feel once more the immense glory he had as the legendary sword god. Then we see his past life, where he was a great Eastern warrior walking through a forest. Then, the master's golden eyes showed a presence that struck fear into anyone who approached. At that moment, he finds himself surrounded by several enemy warriors trying to capture him at all costs. With that, the master grips the hilt of his sacred weapon, preparing for his super-fast fighting style. But with a single circular motion, he knocks down all the guys at once with incredible skill. Then the hero stands victorious on the battlefield, while the wind blows the leaves around him. Then he remembers that he has all the memories of his past life kept inside his mind. At that moment, the young man remembers that his ancient life began in a very dark underground market. And because of that, he recalls the suffering he went through when he was just a commodity with no value at all. But his childhood in his past life was marked by the terrible life of being a servant to very cruel men. Then the little orphan would stay trapped on the cold floor, with no hope of ever getting out of there. Then a crazy fight broke out in that place and completely changed the child's destiny. At that moment, a powerful warrior in ancient clothes defeats the bad guys and extends his hand. And with that, the trapped little boy looks up with a lot of fear at that strong man standing there. But the savior asks in a very gentle voice if the little one would like to leave that place with him. Then the kind-hearted master shows a warm smile that saved the boy from that pit of pain. Then the incredibly strong swordsman helps the young servant stand up and breaks all of his chains. At that moment, the two walk up the stairs of a beautiful temple, where the boy would be trained in the future. From then on, the prodigy boy studied hard to bear the weight of becoming the greatest hero of that era. But time passed and transformed the defenseless boy into the legendary warrior known as the Sword God. Then the hero smiles in the present, thinking that his past glory doesn't matter anymore in today's world. Then the young man's friend gets startled and says that he has gone completely crazy with this wild idea. At that moment, the two start arguing in the living room, while the young man tries to calm down his nervous partner. Then the roommate points in shock at the massive tech pod that is now in the bedroom. But he asks very seriously if the young man has any idea how difficult the rules are to enter the league. Then the snacker explains that it is mandatory to already be a highly successful streamer to get the spot. So the partner vents quite angrily, saying that gaining all that fame is no easy task. At that moment, we see a screen of the young man's channel doing a food live stream with a lot of charisma, and the broadcasts also require incredible gaming skills to manage to attract more people. But a good content creator needs to have a lot of humor when facing the dangers of the games. Then, the work of editing the videos takes entire nights of effort in front of the computer. So the friend warns that even when doing everything right, many channels fail and have no one watching. At that moment, the roommate asks how the young man expects to win without ever having touched a pod. With that, the two young men stare at each other in the room, and the dark-haired boy becomes thoughtful about the things he heard. But the young man asks if there is a way to secure the spot relying solely on his combat technique. Then the friend smirks, admiring the stubbornness of the young man who refuses to give up on his plans. So he reveals that to achieve that, one would have to defeat the best female player in the entire country. At that moment, the hero claims with great calmness that he truly is stronger than the grand champion. With that, the roommate makes a funny face, unable to believe such boldness from him. But he slaps the device, challenging his friend to prove all that talent right now in the game. Then the guy promises to do all the household chores if the dark-haired boy manages to win his challenge. So the hero gives a subtle, victorious smile, knowing that bet would be incredibly easy. At that moment, the young man accepts the challenge with total confidence and faces his roommate without fear, and the door of the modern booth closes very slowly with an electronic sound, signaling the start of the test. But the virtual reality system begins the countdown to connect his mind to the game. Then the panel displays the player's profile with his playtime completely at 0 at the moment. So the dark-haired boy calmly closes his eyes as he feels his consciousness going straight into the game. At that moment, he remembers his ancient life when he walked victoriously beneath the bamboo leaves. And with that, the memory of the master comes to his mind, teaching that doubt prevents one from conquering anything. But the warrior opens his golden eyes, which shine with a very strong determination for the fight. Then the young man wakes up lying on the wooden floor of a very beautiful, traditional Eastern dojo. Then, a system notification pops up on the screen, saying that his friend has just entered the training area. At that moment, the partner's avatar materializes in the room with a friendly smile to welcome him. With that, the two talk in the virtual hall, and the dark-haired boy explains that this is the game's official training mode, but the place serves to test combat skills against computer-controlled enemies. Then the snacker hands a training sword to the dark-haired boy and tells him to face the machine's challenge. Then, a blue glow appears in front of the young man, showing that the challenge setup is already complete. At that moment, the panel explains that the difficulty level goes up to 10 and simulates the best players in the game. Then he finds out that the top female player in the country has held the record for the maximum level for 5 consecutive years. But the friend warns that to get there, it is necessary to pass through stages that are almost impossible for a rookie. Then the machine lets out a light signal, surprising the guys with an unexpected action from the system. So a holographic message floats in the air, announcing that a new match has been successfully created. At that moment, a cybernetic combat robot materializes in the middle of a bright blue light, and because of that, the partner asks in shock if the dark-haired boy really chose such a high difficulty. But the training machine advances very fast and delivers a swift attack against the young man standing there. Then the hero blocks the attack with his wooden sword and shows a super calm smile. Then the friend widens his eyes in disbelief upon seeing that perfect defense executed without effort. At that moment, the protagonist dodges the strikes with ease and displays absurd agility. With that, the robot opponent swings its sword in an arc of red light, trying to hit the boy. But the young man dodges the aerial attack with precise movements that he learned in his past life. Then the dark-haired boy counters very quickly and releases a super powerful wave of blue energy. Then the robot stumbles back a bit dazed, while its health bar drops by half after the strike. At that moment, the partner watches everything breaking into a cold sweat, not knowing if that was just a lucky strike. And our hero assumes a relaxed fighting stance, holding his weapon with just one hand, but he advances and delivers a sequence of very strong blue slashes that completely destroy the robot. Then the robot's hand tries to raise the sword to begin a new defensive movement against him. Then the young master delivers a very strong side strike and creates a massive wave of blue energy in the air. At that moment, the opponent's arm is severed and turns into digital pixels on the wooden floor. Because of that, the roommate yells in fear upon seeing that unbelievable display of power. But the testing machine falls completely weaponless and without the strength to continue fighting him. Then the young man takes a step forward, walking very calmly over the remains of his opponent. Then the blue lights on the enemy's visor begin to glitch, indicating that its system has shut down. At that moment, the dark-haired boy looks down with a super confident smile after winning the easy fight, and a massive red smoke covers the place while the opponent's simulation fails completely. But the system's screen begins to glitch heavily, full of colorful static because of the quick victory. Then the hero observes the pieces of the robot on the floor after the end of that surprising combat. Then the entire body of the defeated opponent begins to dissolve into particles of holographic light. At that moment, the game panel shows that he defeated level 9 and reached position 107. Then the friend completely loses it upon discovering that that powerful machine was set to level 9. But the dark-haired boy remains calm while a mysterious red energy begins to form around him. Then the system begins to rebuild the stage, creating a new warrior for the next battle. Then a much more advanced robot appears in the arena, glowing with a very bright orange visor. At that moment, the robot takes the form of the famous national champion and leaves the snacker in total shock. With that, the roommate starts sweating nervously, knowing the extreme danger of the new enemy. But the dark-haired boy stays relaxed, holding his training weapon with the posture of someone who rules the place. Then, we return to the laboratory where the assistant approaches to speak with the research director. Then the young woman asks why they took such a strange approach to help the dark-haired young man. At that moment, she questions the decision to lend such expensive equipment for free to the boy. Then we see a cute drawing of the protagonist running away happily while carrying the machine on his back. But the director responds with a smile that she simply hates to see such great talent go to waste. Then she analyzes the young man's file, remembering that he was incredible even with his very low synchronization. So the scientist smiles confidently upon realizing that his skills are much greater now. At that moment, the assistant admits that going to the tournament is difficult, but the boss is planning something bigger. And with that, the director affirms with a mysterious look that his chances are very promising. But she truly believes that the dark-haired boy's victory in the championship can indeed become a reality. Then, the metallic sound of clashing swords begins to echo very loudly throughout the training hall. Then the dark-haired boy begins the fight against the robotic copy, trading swift strikes filled with sparks. At that moment, the snacker watches the fight breaking into a cold sweat, unable to believe his friend's crazy performance. With that, a system screen asks if he would like to record that epic battle in high quality. But the roommate cracks a mischievous smile, realizing that that recording is worth gold on the internet. Then he celebrates, knowing that that incredible match would make a really cool video for his channel. Then the champion's robot leaps into the air and delivers a powerful vertical slash that is blocked instantly. At that moment, the dark-haired boy holds back the opponent's force and generates a blast of blue energy across the room. With that, the machine retreats very quickly with nimble leaps, proving that its agility is immense. but the master just observes the opponent, recognizing the refined technique of that famous player. Then he remembers the girl smiling on the television, knowing that she truly has a unique talent. Then the dark-haired boy acknowledges that her talent is greater than that of any warrior from his past life. At that moment, the protagonist makes a funny pose, thinking that the only exception to this rule is himself. And because of that, the roommate starts screaming in despair at his companion's boldness. But the fight continues intensely with rapid sword movements that cut the air with red trails. Then the snacker gestures with his hand, explaining how the fight is happening in an incredible way. Then we see the hero's hand gripping the hilt of his sword with total firmness for the attack. At that moment, he draws the sword in the blink of an eye and prepares his final strike for the fight. And with that, the opponent's weapon flies away and lands on the wooden floor with a clattering metal sound. But the dark-haired boy mentions that virtual strikes don't cause real pain or make you lose blood. The young man runs his hand over his stomach and praises the game, even though he lost a single health point. Then the partner stares at him completely shocked, unable to believe the crazy thing he just did. Then the snacker asks if he let himself get hit on purpose, and the young man says it was out of curiosity. But the robotic opponent begins to rebuild itself in the arena, glowing brightly with digital energy. Then the cybernetic clone crouches on the wooden floor and creates a gust of dust across the room. At that moment, the machine charges forward with everything and delivers a swift aerial attack with its sword raised high. With that, a massive wave of energy appears in the middle of the hall, showing the power of that swift strike. But the dark-haired boy just observes the attack without showing fear while the opponent focuses its red targeting sight on him. Then the two warriors clash their swords and generate a massive golden blast across the entire place. Then the young man holds his weapon with great determination, keeping his eyes on the enemy's movements. At that moment, bright sparks fly everywhere as the robot tries to force the sword downward, and because of that, the machine's visor begins to flash in orange, activating its combat analysis. But the young master focuses his sharp gaze, ready to predict the enemy's next sequence of strikes. Then the cybernetic clone makes a very swift spinning motion and creates a trail of blue energy. Then our hero counters the enemy strike with a precise kick and sends the opponent back instantly. At that moment, the robotic opponent slides across the floor, trying to regain its balance to attack again. And with that, a damage indicator pops up on the screen, showing that the machine's health just dropped significantly. But the testing machine asks the dark-haired boy if he isn't going to attack, while he just stays in his stance. Then the ground shakes heavily with the impact of a new attack that raises a lot of dust from the training dojo. Then the young man advances through the air in an incredible way, warning that he is going to defeat the opponent once and for all. At that moment, the two swords clash with immense force, generating blue sparks and a beam of light, and the force between the two wooden training swords creates a crazy pressure that even cracks the air. But the weapons begin to splinter from the impact, indicating that the fight has reached its limit. Then the snacker friend watches everything open-mouthed, unable to believe the speed of that battle. Then the robot's sword shatters completely into several glowing pieces from the hero's strength. At that moment, the robotic opponent is thrown back after losing its weapon in the middle of the clash. With that, the dark-haired boy gives a very confident smirk, knowing that victory was already guaranteed. But the machine falls sitting on the ground without strength, and the young man points his weapon, declaring the end of the fight. Then the young man warns that if she trains for another 80 years, she might stand a chance against him. Then he delivers one final precise slash of blue energy that shuts down the training robot's systems. At that moment, the holographic screen announces that he won, and the snacker friend stands frozen looking at the dojo. Then the friend loses it, yelling that he defeated the champion, and the dark-haired boy asks if this works for the live stream. But the next day dawns sunny and shows the building where the two young men currently live. Then the roommate wearing an apron tells him to make the rice, while the lazy one responds from the couch. Then the lazy one complains about the food and tells his partner to vacuum and take the clothes off the drying rack. At that moment, The lazy guy leaves, picking his teeth, and tells the other to wash the dishes, leaving his friend annoyed. With that, the bedroom door closes very quickly, indicating that the dark-haired boy is going to prepare to play, but the young man looks at the massive tech pod in his room and remembers that he installed the game yesterday. Then the panel opens, and the protagonist thinks it's best to log in right away to set up his stream. So the dark-haired boy lies down in the virtual gaming pod and closes his eyes, beginning the mental connection. At that moment, a super bright golden light fills his entire vision, indicating that the game has started, and with that, the young man slowly opens his blue-tinted eyes, realizing that the transition is complete. But he wakes up standing in the middle of a completely white digital room with glowing lines on the walls. Then the dark-haired boy looks around confused, wondering where he is and what that strange place is. Then a holographic panel appears in front of him with a digital chime to catch his attention. At that moment, the system explains that this is the lobby and that he should use the space to get ready. With that, the young master puts his hand on his chin, remembering that streamers use these rooms to interact. But he makes a bored face upon noticing the emptiness of the place, thinking that he needs to decorate the space. Then the young man clicks on the floating screen, deciding it's time to open the famous livestream platform. Then the panel displays the app's interface, with several gaming channels broadcasting live at the moment. And with that, the young man reveals that his plan now is to become famous as an online content creator. Then the dark-haired boy looks at the stream start panel, anxious to reveal which game he had chosen. At that moment, the screen shows the official title of an assassin game set in the Middle Ages. Then, we see a beautiful medieval square with a massive fountain and several ancient buildings and people. But he remembers that this new adventure broke viewership records on its very first day. Then the reviews online show that players spend hundreds of hours playing without stopping. Then the game shows a beautiful ancient clock on the tower and states that the gameplay is perfect for beginners. At that moment, a metal grappling hook flies through the air and grips tightly onto the stone wall of a castle. And with that, a mysterious hooded warrior rappels down through the shadows to slip into the place, but his hand holds firmly onto the edge of the stone wall to climb up silently without anyone seeing. Then the stealthy fighter crouches on the wall under the light of the full moon while bats fly by. Then he observes the massive golden city down below, planning his steps in the darkness of the night. At that moment, the young master gives a smirk, very anxious to begin his first test. And with that, the dark-haired boy's golden eyes shine in a confident way, indicating that the show has begun. But a quite large blue notification warns on the screen that his live stream has started successfully. Then he uses the funny title that his snacker friend suggested to attract people who want to give tips. So the young man clicks on the holographic screen, wondering if that tactic will actually bring people in. At that moment, he remembers that his roommate insisted on using this silly phrase to catch attention. With that, the hooded warrior focuses on the mission, while feeling the strong wind rustling his hair. But the dark-haired boy stands on the edge of the roof, observing the bright lights of that ancient city. Then an elegant lady in a long dress walks on the sidewalk, carrying a dark umbrella. Then he praises the game's really cool graphics and decides that he is going to enjoy the immersion to the fullest. At that moment, the young master smiles, satisfied to be controlling a character with a cool style. With that, the young man's black boots touch the stone ground in a silent and very fast manner. But the game's automated voice reveals that the official name of that hooded avatar in the game is Dane. Then a very beautiful blonde ally appears in front of him and warns that the new mission is quite dangerous. So the hero responds casually, asking when their work has ever been safe even once. At that moment, the dark-haired boy realizes that his character has automated dialogue in this beginning tutorial. With that, he finds it very wild to notice that even his own voice was changed to match the hero. But the young blonde ally listens to his words with a very worried look full of seriousness. Then the protagonist smiles and says that whoever chooses to take lives must always be ready to fall. Then the girl agrees and asks him to be careful, as the royal guards might already be after him. At that moment, the dark haired boy calms his companion, telling her to go ahead and wait at the tavern nearby. With that, the young man hands a mysterious note to the blonde girl to finalize the last orders of the plan. But he states the assassin's creed, warning that nothing is true and that she must question everything. Then the dark-haired boy smirks, wondering if the real challenge is going to start now in the game. Then the young master takes out a sharp dagger that shines brightly in the darkness of that cold night. At that moment, the official logo of the new stage appears amidst the dark clouds under the moonlight. With that, the warrior runs very fast across the rooftops, leaving only a trail of dust and blue wind. But his hand pulls the rope with great firmness to perform an incredible acrobatic leap in the air. Then the young man makes nimble swinging movements, showing that he inherited all his talent from the past. So he leaps with precision and lands right on top of a lamppost without making a single sound. At that moment, the dark-haired boy lands lightly on the ground and generates a small shockwave under his feet. With that, his yellow eyes shine like those of a predator ready to focus on its first prey. But the system warning indicates the end of the automated mode, and the young man feels a bit dizzy with the change. Then the hero goes back to walking through the dark streets, trying to find the right path to move forward. Then he notices that the passage is blocked by a massive grate of iron pipes in the alley. At that moment, a floating blue notification instructs the player to climb the pipes on the wall. With that, the young man looks up shocked, wondering if he is really going to have to climb that with his bare hands. But he grips firmly onto the iron pipe, which begins to glow a little with the climb command. Then the young man climbs the wall using the pipes, while the system assists him with blue aiming lines. Then the dark-haired boy lands in an amazing way on the roof and leaves a trail of blue energy. At that moment, the young master looks at his hands surprised, noticing how well his body is moving. With that, he relaxes his body, realizing that the machine takes full control in automated mode. But the system panel warns that the tutorial mission is to eliminate a very important noble on the map. Then the young man focuses his gaze, understanding that he needs to defeat this target to complete the challenge. Then the hero praises the game map for clearly showing which direction he should follow now. At that moment, a holographic instruction tells the young man to use the rope to climb down the wall safely. With that, he slides down in a very calm manner, finding the basic command super easy to use. But the dark-haired boy becomes thoughtful as he faces the slow descent and shows a rather bored face. Then the young man feels a massive curiosity to know what would happen if he let go of the rope, so he simply decides to jump halfway through to try to speed up his arrival to the ground. At that moment, the hero opens his hands and lets go of the support rope in a completely thoughtless way. With that, he falls from an absurd height and hits the ground with a lot of force, kicking up leaves. But the dark-haired boy stands up with his hand on the back of his neck, complaining of pain upon seeing that the free fall didn't work out. Then he looks at the stream chat and notices that people are laughing at his rookie player behavior. So the young man feels very embarrassed upon realizing that people are making fun of him for the fall. At that moment, he checks the number of viewers and is shocked to see 4 people watching. With that, the hero notices that the tactic of putting that funny title worked out great thanks to his friend. But the audience in the chat tells the young man to stop stalling and start the tutorial mission of the game already. Then the dark-haired boy focuses on the panel, remembering that his roommate recommended talking to himself on stream. So he recalls his partner's advice not to focus on the numbers, but rather to interact with the audience. At that moment, the young man stays focused, knowing that interacting with the crowd is the key to success. With that, he understands that large channels have chats that are way too fast, where messages get lost. But the young man prefers to start a casual conversation to respond to the people looking at his account. Then he is surprised to see that users can view his profile's creation date. Then the scenery changes, revealing the target's creepy mansion under a blood-red full moon. At that moment, the hero gets close to the house and agrees that the dark atmosphere of the place is incredible. With that, he approaches the main gate, while the chat tells him to read the ally's letter. But the young man pulls the note from his pocket, remembering that his blonde companion gave him very good tips. Then he reads the message, which details the enemy's exact location on the second floor of the building. Then the dark-haired boy finds out that there are about 20 guards watching the place while he draws his weapon. At that moment, the system materializes a glowing blue metal gauntlet on our hero's wrist. With that, the young man analyzes his 2 starting pieces of equipment and thinks they are perfect for the fight. But he firmly holds the grip of the bladed cane and prepares to begin the intrusion. Then the viewers lose it in the chat and beg him to stop because the dark-haired boy wants to go right through the front. Then the hero gets quite confused, not understanding the reason for so much despair from the people in his chat. At that moment, he crosses his arms, realizing that the atmosphere and the messages from the crowd have changed. With that, the young man asks if he shouldn't go through the front, while the chat talks about the direct attack. But the system screen explains that enemies get stronger if the player is spotted in the mansion. Then the tutorial highlights that only highly experienced players attempt to fight all the guards. Then the dark-haired boy asks if this playstyle focused on direct combat is truly impossible. At that moment, the viewers comment that several good players tried for hours and gave up. With that, the young man concludes the challenge is not impossible if the fighter has very good techniques. But he starts walking toward the main gate without showing the slightest doubt in his steps. Then the warrior gives a nice smirk, confident that his past technique would be enough. Then the hero finds himself in the center of the hall, completely surrounded by dozens of armored soldiers. At that moment, the chat users tell the young man to just drop already to skip this difficult part of the game. With that, the dark-haired boy faces everyone while holding the hilt of his cane, ready to surprise his audience. But with a perfect movement, he parries the guard's heavy strike and generates a bright flash in the room. Then the protagonist dodges in an incredible way and leans his body back to avoid the danger. Then the dark-haired boy delivers a precise strike to the opponent and makes bright sparks fly everywhere. At that moment, the guard falls defeated, and the young master remains standing, maintaining his fighting stance. With that, the hero gestures calmly and taunts the soldiers, saying that they need to train. But the enemies panic and call for reinforcements while the young man's chat is amazed by his defenses. Then the warrior advances down the hallway and delivers a rapid sequence of cane strikes to the opponents. Then he takes a deep breath for a second and takes advantage of the short pause to rest after the fights. At that moment, his boots walk calmly across the red carpet, stepping right over the helmets. With that, the young master realizes that he has already managed to defeat 6 guards without taking a single scratch. But the stream viewers start to doubt his talent, wondering if he really is a rookie. Then the dark-haired boy warns that he will ban a user if they keep sending repetitive messages on the stream. Then the hero actually kicks out the troublemaker, making the chat laugh at his speed and reflexes. At that moment, the audience comments that the young man is going to be highly successful online with all this confidence. With that, he focuses his golden gaze, looking quite thoughtful, since he never wanted fame in his past life. But the young man remembers that in his ancient life, he was also looked down upon, even though he defeated great warriors. Then we see that his massive talent in the past transformed him into the legendary solitary sword god. Then he remembers the scoldings he used to get from other fighters while lazily cleaning his ear. At that moment, the chat asks what the secret is to managing to parry attacks with such perfect precision. With that, the dark-haired boy gives a nice smile and gestures, saying that you just have to remember your previous life. But the users go completely silent upon hearing that silly explanation he gave right then and there. Then, the audience thinks he is lying and starts insulting him out of anger, while the young man finds it funny. Then a guard yells, warning of the intrusion, and the young man notices that all the soldiers are charging at him. At that moment, the hero ignores the danger and cleans his ear again, annoying those watching even more. With that, he starts drawing stick figures on the screen to explain in a simple way how to defend. But the users warn that even the game's pros struggle to master this difficult technique. Then the dark-haired boy recalls that the level 9 machine he faced yesterday already had a professional level. So the hero realizes that to perform the perfect defense, it is necessary to predict the enemy's movements. At that moment, the chat tells him to turn back before he gets defeated, but the young man gives a smirk. With that, the young man simply ignores the warnings and takes a confident step toward the enemies, but he claims mockingly that the challenge was easy, further annoying the audience watching the stream. Then a viewer steps up to defend the young man, commenting that his plays were very brilliant. Then the other people start fighting in the chat, attacking the defender and saying it was just luck. At that moment, the dark-haired boy just observes the argument and laughs upon seeing that his only defender became a joke. With that, he recalls that in his ancient life, he was also looked down upon even though he defeated great warriors. But the young man knows that things have changed a bit and focuses on the fight, looking sideways and very determined. Then, the sound of running footsteps echoes down the house's hallway and catches our protagonist's attention. Then the 5 heavily armored knights block the young man's path and command him to surrender. At that moment, the hero tightly grips the hilt of his cane and prepares for the confrontation. With that, he makes a swift dash that rips the carpet and creates a strong gust of wind in the area. But the young man appears right in front of the first opponent and delivers a quick attack to prove his worth. Then the Iron Knight is thrown far away by the force of the impact, leaving the others astonished. Then the dark-haired boy focuses his golden eyes in a way that instills fear and sets off toward the next targets. At that moment, he executes an absurd sequence of energy slashes and blocks the enemy attacks. With that, the blades clash at immense speed, making the chat lose it, unable to understand what they are seeing. The pressure from the swords generates bright sparks, showing that the young man completely dominates the fights. Then, the full moon shines in red tones over the dark mansion, giving a creepy vibe to the game. Then the hero looks to the side and comments that the pressure from enemies up close is truly impressive. At that moment, he focuses his gaze and maintains total calmness to continue executing his plans. And because of that, the chat crowd keeps betting on how many times he will try until he gets tired. But the young man notices that 3 more people joined the stream and notes that provoking the audience helps. Then, the young man walks with firm steps down the hallway, thinking that everything will work out fine as long as he doesn't overdo it. Then one of the armored guards turns around quickly after hearing a strange noise behind him. At that moment, the soldiers yell, ordering the intruder to identify himself immediately in the middle of the hall. With that, the hero smiles under his hood and calms the viewers, letting them know he has already gotten the hang of the fight. But the chat starts making fun of him and jokes that seeing his quick defeat would be good content. Then a knight leaps in anger and raises his greatsword to deliver a devastating aerial attack. Then the dark-haired boy's gaze becomes super sharp and focused on the exact timing to dodge that attack. At that moment, he blocks the heavy strike and generates a flash and bright sparks throughout the room. With that, the young master spins quickly and delivers a swift red slash that hits the opponent. But the guard falls motionless onto the stone floor, while the young man simply keeps his weapon in a fighting position. Then the chat starts losing it in surprise, wondering if that rookie really just parried. Then the dark-haired boy tightly grips the handle of the staff, preparing for more enemies. At that moment, a massive damage number pops up on the screen, indicating that the hero's strike was effective. With that, the young man gets a bit confused, wondering if the tutorial opponents dropped that quickly. But another soldier charges in anger and delivers a strike from behind to try to surprise the dark-haired boy. Then the hero counters the attack perfectly and creates a massive bluish flash in the clash. Then the viewers are left stunned and comment that his luck is absurd and that he is incredibly lucky. At that moment, the young master makes a confused face, not understanding why they give so much importance to this. With that, he faces the opponents fallen on the wooden floor, maintaining his usual calmness in the fight. But the defeated enemy's body dissolves into particles of light, showing the young man's easy victory. Then the hero reads the chat messages and asks innocently what that thing called parrying actually is. Then the audience almost falls backward upon discovering that he made perfect plays, without even knowing the technique. At that moment, more guards appear on the upper balconies and order everyone to attack the lone intruder. With that, the soldiers run down the stairs with their swords drawn, making a lot of noise in the hall. But the young man just observes their approach in a relaxed way, holding his wooden weapon. Then the warrior performs an incredible sequence of slashes and defeats several soldiers all at once. Then he moves like a shadow through the stage and masterfully dodges all the enemy swords. At that moment, the dark-haired boy's golden eyes shine, showing his total focus in the heat of battle. With that, he executes unbelievable aerial dodges, making the chat wonder if he is a professional. But one of the opponents tries to deliver a furious top-down strike and yells in immense anger at the hero. Then the dark-haired boy slides across the carpet and defends the attack, generating bright sparks in the room. Then the knight is left completely dazed by the impact while trying to recover his strength. At that moment, the young man delivers a devastating spinning slash and throws two enemies back at once. With that, the young master gives a smirk, satisfied to notice that the fight is going well. But in another part of the city, an experienced player watches the live stream and his legs shake in astonishment. Then this crazy fan of the game is left shocked and open-mouthed, unable to believe the rookie's plays. Then we see that he is highly known in the community for being one of the game's biggest experts. At that moment, he remembers that the game creators warned that winning in aggressive mode was impossible, and this gaming addict loved extreme challenges and tried everything to win at the maximum difficulty level. But the terrible defeat on the screen left him frustrated, leaving only the despair of not being able to pass. Then people used silly strategies to cheat, knocking down walls onto the bosses. Then the other streamers used explosives hidden on the benches to defeat the enemies. At that moment, some would stay hidden for hours waiting for the target to pass by in a very cowardly way. With that, the specialist cried at his desk, with no hope of seeing anyone win with pure skill. But now he cries tears of happiness upon seeing that the rookie from that small stream is putting on a show. Then the dark-haired boy performs spectacular maneuvers, cutting the air and showing the exact gameplay he dreamed of. Then the veteran yells, slamming the table, and fills the chat with compliments, crowning the young man as the greatest. At that moment, the mansion's floor is covered with fallen armor, proving the young man's victory. With that, the new viewers begin to wonder if the young man is using some kind of cheat, but the hero just looks at the chat panel and responds calmly that he is only dodging and defending. Then the chat viewers start teasing him, saying that that stream is pure emotional torture. With that, the young man scratches his head lazily and says he can simply end the broadcast. Then he notices that all 6 viewers decided to follow his channel and thinks that's pretty good. Then a loud explosion happens, right in the middle of the hallway, while the warrior watches everything calmly. At that moment, heavy footsteps shake the stone floor, indicating that the big boss has finally arrived. With that, our hero dodges a devastating strike and leaves the chat impressed with his reflexes. But the massive enemy with his spiked whip starts laughing out loud and calls the young man a filthy rat. Then the dark-haired boy runs very fast down the long, dark hallway to get close to the terrible opponent. At that moment, the young man leaps high and delivers a quick strike, while the villain tries to defend against everything. But the hero's staff hits the target and takes a tiny bit of damage from the opponent's massive health bar. Then the villain remains standing with his back turned, not seeming to have suffered any impact from that attack. Then the big guy turns around with an evil smile and makes fun of the young warrior's weak attack. At that moment, the protagonist analyzes the situation and notices that the monster's health barely dropped. With that, he asks the chat audience if it is possible to block a whip attack with the sword. But the boss yells in anger that he is going to show all the true power of his bone-crushing weapon. Then the heavy strike hits the ground and destroys all the woodwork, while the hero quickly escapes. Then the dark-haired boy performs a spectacular acrobatics in the air and passes right over the giant's attack. At that moment, the young man blocks the heavy chain with precision and maintains his calm expression. With that, the opponent spins his weapon rapidly and creates a barrier of wind that instills a lot of fear. But the young master advances from above and ignores the enemy defense to strike the rival once more. Then he lands another weak slash, and the villain laughs, saying that his strong body will never be defeated. Then a new heavy strike of spikes explodes in the stage and generates a massive wave of greenish light. At that moment, the hero retreats, sliding on the floor, and notes that his current attack deals very little damage. With that, the dark-haired boy becomes thoughtful, wondering if he will be able to win the match with this low damage output. But a user warns that the fight has a time limit of 5 minutes before resulting in a defeat. Then the timer appears on the screen, showing that just over 4 minutes of game time remain. So the dark-haired boy focuses his sharp gaze, preparing to act much faster than before in the fight. At that moment, the giant attacks again, laughing out loud, and tells the young man to pay attention to the confrontation. With that, the young man understands that he needs to change his strategy urgently to beat the time limit. But an experienced viewer gives a golden tip and says to always focus the strikes on the exact same spot. Then the dark-haired boy decides to test the chat's suggestion and thinks it is truly worth trying this plan. So he thanks the user for the information and advances very quickly with his blade drawn. At that moment, the young master delivers a precise vertical slash, coming down from above with great speed. With that, the strike hits the opponent's shoulder dead on and causes much greater damage this time. But the young man realizes that focusing the attacks on the same spot of the enemy's body is the secret to winning. Then the boss gets super annoyed upon feeling the pain of the wound and glares at the young man with immense rage. Then, the dark-haired boy looks at the timer, knowing that he cannot give the opponent room to breathe. At that moment, he initiates a wild sequence of rapid slashes, and the chat celebrates the play. With that, the big guy panics, grips the weapon's handle tightly, and calls the young man a filthy rat. But the villain tries to land a heavy punch and yells for the dark-haired boy to get his hands off his weapon. Then the dark-haired boy dodges the punch with great ease and keeps his focus on the gap in the armor. Then he delivers a precise strike to the enemy's throat and makes his health bar plummet. At that moment, several extremely high damage numbers rise on the screen and leave the viewers shocked. With that, the young man finalizes the incredible sequence of movements, but notices that the rival still resists. But he simply turns his face calmly and comments that he needs just one more strike to win. Then the timer indicates that only 51 seconds remain until the end of the grand challenge. Then a beam of green light rips through the entire mansion and shows the power of the warrior's final strike. At that moment, the bed in the boss's room is cut in half by the massive force of the energy attack. With that, the enemy spits blood and gestures with hatred, calling the protagonist a government dog. But the villain tears his own clothes and screams in despair that he will not accept falling alone right there. Then the game screen glows with the mission accomplished message, with only 40 seconds left. With that, the young man clicks the computer mouse and proudly ends the recording of his match. At that moment, the video of his incredible play is posted on the network with a very catchy title. Then the video editing shows the incredible feat of defeating all the enemies just by defending. Then the clip highlights that he was the first player in the world to manage to eliminate that boss. With that, night falls on the city, and the lights of the residential building remain completely on. At that moment, a young man on the other side of the screen watches the video and thinks that play is way too bizarre, but the viewer is left open-mouthed, unable to believe that he actually witnessed the first victory of all. Then the game scene shows the trails of destruction left by the hero's energy slash. Then the wounded boss holds his own chest, while spitting blood and anger in a terrifying way. At that moment, the villain panics, opens his clothing, and screams that he will not go down alone in that place. With that, the dark-haired boy notices the rival's strange reaction and is a bit surprised by that behavior, but several red magic circles begin to form on the ground, preparing a devastating attack. Then, a massive explosion of fire consumes the entire hall of the mansion with a deafening noise. Then the young man leaps backward quickly and uses his agility to manage to escape the danger. At that moment, the hero wipes away the dust and understands that the opponent used a self-destruct spell. With that, the guards outside see the intruder under the light of the red moon and run toward him. But the young master grits his teeth, focused on fleeing that location before being caught for good. Then the young man flees, running very fast through the dark streets while the soldiers yell behind him. Then, the warrior leaps toward a massive cliff in the middle of the forest to lose everyone. At that moment, a bright and very swift arrow cuts through the dark sky and goes straight toward him. With that, the young man notices the attack coming from behind and widens his eyes, quite surprised. But the hero ends up being hit by the magic arrow and loses his balance right on the edge of the rock. Then the young man's boot slips on the stone ledge, causing him to fall into the great abyss. Then the dark-haired boy falls backward down the cliff, while the darkness of the night consumes his body. At that moment, he extends his hand toward the sky under the moonlight and falls into a deep lake down below. With that, his vision begins to darken slowly, and the young man closes his eyes and loses consciousness. But the warrior's body sinks into the freezing water of the river and generates a massive whirlpool on the surface. Then the sun rises between the mountains and lights up the entire forest, revealing a beautiful landscape. Then we see the dark-haired boy lying unconscious on the bank of the clear water river after being washed away. At that moment, the hero's hand remains slightly in the water while he begins to wake up slowly. With that, mysterious footsteps of someone approaching echo across the wet sand toward the young man. But a shadow covers the young man's body, indicating that an unknown person has just found him. Then a hooded traveler observes the young man, fallen on the riverbank in a rather curious way. Then the person holds a golden eagle crest that shines under the light of dawn in the forest. At that moment, the stranger smirks, and the system announces that control will switch characters. With that, the chat comments that the transition scene is always the same, and that the previous hero always perishes. But the dark-haired boy grumbles, saying that if it were him, he would have deflected the arrow, and the users find it funny. Then the young man claps his hands excitedly and decides to focus on what truly matters in the match. Then, the young man wonders what the next step is that he must take to continue his adventure. At that moment, a follower recommends going to the tavern to talk to a woman named Christina. With that, the dark-haired boy notices that the scene left him exactly in front of the place that was indicated. But the warrior just observes the location calmly before deciding to take his first steps. Then he opens the door and reveals a rather packed and nosy tavern with many people drinking. Then the young master spots a beautiful blonde woman working attentively behind the wooden counter. At that moment, the dark-haired boy realizes that she is clearly the character he needs to talk to. With that, the blonde server notices the young man's approach and turns around with a rather curious look, but the young blonde asks politely if he needs any help in the establishment. Then the dark-haired boy smirks and responds warmly that he truly needs many things from there. Then, he realizes that his character went back to speaking on his own in the simulation's automated mode. Then, the blonde woman widens her blue eyes upon hearing the bold words spoken by the protagonist. With that, she wipes a glass cup, demonstrating that she is suspicious of that young man's presence there. At that moment, the server faces him with seriousness and asks who he truly is in that place. But the dark-haired boy puts the woman at ease and says he is there simply to offer his precious help. Then, he affirms with a mysterious look that he has total confidence in his combat techniques. Then she is surprised and questions if the young man might be the famous warrior coming from the western region. At that moment, the young master gives a smirk and confirms that she truly heard about him. With that, the blonde recalls the rumors that he is a mercenary who accepts any type of job, but the blonde server sighs and decides to reveal her name and asks the young man to do the same. Then the hero becomes thoughtful for a second, about to say what he would like to be called now. Then the system panel appears in front of him and asks the player to type the character's name. At that moment, the chat viewers wonder if the young man is finally going to choose a nickname. With that, He remembers that his streaming profile was using his modern real name, but the dark-haired boy cracks a subtle smile and decides to type a rather mysterious nickname on the screen. Then the young man says out loud that his name is nameless, leaving the chat completely confused. Then the dark-haired boy explains that this nickname was a major trend in his ancient Eastern life. At that moment, he recalls that the term nameless seemed very cool and mysterious in his past. With that, the hero presses the confirmation button and accepts the new official nickname on the server, but the blonde accepts the young man's response while the system unlocks new mercenary missions. Then the warrior questions how they will maintain contact from then on for the next jobs. Then the server glares at the Golden Crest and says she needs to know the whereabouts of the former owner. At that moment, the young master reveals in a calm manner that he laid him to rest near the western docks. With that, she extends her hand and delivers a small black brooch for him to use as a communicator. But the system warns on the screen that the protagonist just obtained a very useful signal stone. Then the blonde flips her hair, which shines brightly, and says she is counting on our hero's work. Then the young man leaves the tavern at the moment when the sun is setting on the horizon of that city. At that moment, the dark-haired boy sighs in relief for having concluded his main objectives for today. With that, the channel's chat highly praises the new nickname and says it is perfect for an assassin. But the hero warns that he is going to end the broadcast for today and promises to be back live tomorrow morning. Then he says goodbye to the audience in a slightly shy and awkward manner and closes the app. Then the young man gets a bit lost messing with the save settings of the immense simulator. At that moment, the booth initiates the mental disconnection process and sends the young man back to reality. With that, the young dark-haired boy clicks on the closing screen and notices that his viewers stayed there. But he finds it funny to remember the bizarre names of the users who followed the broadcast. Then the young man hears a strange sound coming from his computer and looks toward the screen confused. Then a notification indicates that a new viewer just entered his chat room right now. At that moment, he wonders for what reason people keep joining, even with the stream offline. With that, the dark-haired boy takes his phone and notices several new topics about his plays in the community. But the roommate watches the videos lying on the mattress, happy with the stream's reception. Then, the dark-haired boy swings the bedroom door wide open and startles his lying friend, who drops his phone. Then, the snacker complains about his companion's lack of manners while massaging his head. At that moment, the partner shows the phone screen, looking quite ecstatic and wanting to understand the situation. With that, the hero focuses his gaze on the device's screen and sees the channel's chat active and full of messages. But the snacker turns completely pale and speechless, not knowing what to say in front of that bizarre scene. Then the young man analyzes the data and realizes that his stream is about to break a record for likes. Then the snacker jumps off the couch excited and explains what will happen when the video goes totally viral. At that moment, he guarantees that the recording will reach the home page and attract many subscribers. With that, the snacker gestures with his hand and tells his friend to go to sleep, already to rest his mind. But the young man just lies down in his bed in the dark while continuing to look at his phone, looking thoughtful. Then he smiles, seeing the new notifications of recommendations, and understands the power of engagement. Then the young man puts the phone aside, thinking that he will see the result of everything in a calm manner. And the device continues to receive various notifications that flash under the dim light of the dark room. At that moment, the dark-haired boy wakes up confused, wondering what the reason is for them questioning his conduct. But he recalls that the game's artificial intelligence used to be much more peaceful and tolerant. Then the new version of the machine possesses an extremely aggressive programming against opponents. Then the combat robot attacks without mercy at the first opportunity and makes the player surrender in panic. At that moment, the cybernetic opponent makes taunting gestures to throw off the competitors. With that, the young man finds that hostile attitude of the machine funny while typing something on the computer, but the dark-haired boy finds it boring to have to repeat so many consecutive battles to update his data in the game. Then he reads the comments accusing him of being a toxic player because of his aggressive technique. Then a strong bluish glow appears on the screen, indicating that a new connection has been successfully initiated. At that moment, the young man is amazed to notice that his channel reached more than 400 followers. With that, the young man smiles, remembering that only 6 people saw the start of his first broadcast. But he presses the blue button on the holographic screen and looks forward to starting his new day of gaming. Then the gears of time begin to turn in a spectacular way to load the medieval setting. Then the system reveals that the new stage of the game takes place on the outskirts of a beautiful stone castle. At that moment, the hero enters the server's loading area and is surrounded by several screens. With that, he interacts with the chat audience and confirms in a friendly manner that the channel is his. But the young man receives a new money donation from a desperate fan wanting tips about the fights. Then the dark-haired boy is quite surprised to have earned his first financial reward. Then the hero explains calmly that the secret is to always strike the opponent in the exact same spot on the body. At that moment, the young master puts his hand on his chin and thinks that his answer was way too simple. With that, he draws a more detailed tip and teaches to focus on weak points to break the stance. But the warrior crosses his arms and notices that the new stage of the game offers various types of missions. Then the young man cracks a smirk and gets quite excited to start testing the new features. So he suggests to his chat to start with a minor theft on the city streets as a warm-up. At that moment, the hero walks in silence among the citizens and blends perfectly into the crowd. With that, people walk through the markets talking and negotiating various cheap goods. But a drunk man with a bottle in his hand stumbles forward and tells everyone to get out of the way. Then the drunk bumps hard into our protagonist's shoulder, who just keeps walking. Then the furious man yells at the young man and tells him to pay more attention to where he is going on the street. At that moment, the drunk goes on his way, grumbling that young people today have no manners. With that, the hero just continues his route in silence under the darkness of that medieval alley. But he displays a proud smile and shows a pouch of coins he managed to steal without anyone seeing. Then the chat viewers are entertained and comment that that stream turned into a thief's broadcast. Then the audience jokes, saying that the young man's pickpocketing techniques must have come from his old home. At that moment, the chat imagines how fun it would be to see the city guards hunting the dark-haired boy on the street. With that, the young master thinks in a humorous way that he will never go hungry with this skill. But the users joke that he has already managed to gather enough money to buy an apartment. Then a mysterious voice calls out for the warrior and interrupts his moment of celebrating the coins. Then the young man turns around calmly and notices 2 corrupt guards from the guild approaching fearfully. At that moment, one of the bullies smiles mockingly and claims that he saw the illegal activities. With that, the thug places his hand on the dark-haired boy's shoulder and says he needs permission to operate. But the young man just displays the coin pouch and asks innocently if they are talking about this. Then, the warrior finds the situation funny and thinks that the game is way too free for allowing extortion, so he prepares for the fight and asks the chat if it is also permitted to take down this type of rival. At that moment, a fan warns that it is totally possible and that he just needs to defeat the guild leader. With that, the hero opens a confident smile and declares that his new objective will be to clean up the entire market. But the chat users are entertained, knowing that the rookie has no idea of the danger level of this boss. Then the enemies of the region quickly mobilize around a large mansion to hunt down the intruder. Then a bald warrior wields his sharp sword while observing the surroundings with a serious look. With that, a firm hand holds onto the edge of the candle chandelier and tries not to make noise on the hall ceiling. At that moment, the blond young man panics upon noticing that he is about to be discovered in the middle of the mission, but he tries to hide and remains lying on the chandelier while hot wax begins to drip slowly. Then the drop of wax falls straight onto the bald guy's head and makes the opponent notice the hidden intruder. Then the enemy delivers a sword strike upward and hits the hiding place, startling the blond young man. At that moment, the screen displays defeat, and the young man regrets having been caught so many consecutive times by the rivals. With that, the blonde guy looks quite pouting, while the chat reminds him that that is already his fourth defeat. But he explains that he needs to eliminate the crime leader to manage to unlock the most difficult area of the map. Then the panel displays an ancient map and details who the rulers are that control the local underworld. Then the lore introduces the mysterious queen who rules as the supreme master of the Grand Magic Tower. At that moment, we see the tower commander with his powerful sphere of blue energy glowing in his hand. With that, the system reveals the leader of the monarchists, focused on plotting his strategy with the pieces. But the big boss of the criminals observes everyone from his throne with a cruel smile and a very cold look. Then the map highlights various secret hideouts where the dangerous leader usually takes shelter from the guards. Then the blonde guy acquires a secret document to try to track down in which of the 10 locations the enemy is hiding. At that moment, the young man checks the electronic device to know what his destination will be in the mission. With that, he discovers that the opponent decided to take shelter in an abandoned theater in the middle of the city. But his followers begin to mock him and tell the young man to defeat all the enemies using just his fists. Then the young man expresses gratitude for the money donation but explains that the survival game does not allow that. Then the viewers insist for him to check the internet forum, where everyone is commenting about this play. At that moment, the blonde guy cracks a curious smile upon noticing that there really is a player performing this feat. With that, he promises to keep playing the entire night if someone manages to win the challenge using the tactic. But the young man celebrates in a silly way and thinks that no one will be able to accomplish that highly difficult feat. Then the blonde guy gets confused upon noticing that the chat is laughing nonstop at his promise to play through the night. Then he realizes that the information is real and tries to make up excuses to escape his bet with the fans. At that moment, the audience begins to boo the blonde guy on the broadcast, causing him to feel embarrassed. With that, he receives another donation and realizes that he has no escape other than to keep his word. But the scene cuts and displays various metal shards falling to the floor after a very violent combat. Then several corrupt soldiers run down the stairs and yell that an intruder just entered the building. Then the troops charge with everything toward the main lobby, where our hero awaits them patiently. At that moment, the dark-haired boy just displays his sarcastic smile and holds his iron staff for the fight. With that, the narrative goes back 30 minutes into the past and shows the young man walking under the city's thin rain. But the hero ends up being surrounded by 4 bullies, trying to corner him in the middle of that alley. Then the dark-haired boy continues following the thugs without demonstrating any concern about the danger there. Then the audience gets worried upon noticing that the protagonist is completely unarmed in their presence. At that moment, the young man wonders if that criminal guild is truly so difficult to defeat in the game. With that, the chat reacts shocked upon realizing that the rookie intends to face the ruler without knowing who it is. But the viewers start laughing out loud in the comments and find the young master's innocence hilarious. Then the dark-haired boy asks his followers to explain in a simple way what that crime ruler thing actually is. Then he reveals that he tried to research the boss the previous night to prepare for the confrontation. At that moment, the young man explains that he preferred not to follow online tutorials to avoid spoilers of the path. With that, the community page highlighted that most of the strategies against the enemy were bad, but the young master gives a smile and claims that the best tactic is simply to hit the rival until they drop. Then we return to the alley, where one of the bullies demands that the dark-haired boy hand over all his belongings. Then the criminals also demand the coin pouch that the young master had stolen moments before. At that moment, the hero makes a bored expression, while his followers know that he will win easily. With that, the henchman pushes the young man in an aggressive way and demands that he hand over all the money without delay. But the thugs start laughing out loud and think that the protagonist is afraid because of his silence. Then the young warrior's countenance turns totally dark and shows that he became very annoyed. Then the dark dark-haired boy asks the guards if they know exactly where the guild leader is hiding. With that, the bully gets annoyed in an aggressive way and questions why they should tell him that. At that moment, the young master closes his leather fist and prepares the first physical strike. Then, the young man smirks and warns that the opponent will be the first to receive a good lesson right there. But the henchmen get totally confused, unable to understand the absurd courage of that intruder in the alley. Then the leader of the criminals orders his men to advance, to defeat the hero without hesitation. Then the first soldier delivers a swift sword strike and generates a trail of light in the dark alley. At that moment, the dark-haired boy leaps through the air in a nimble way and masterfully passes over the adversary. With that, he executes a perfect spinning movement that rips the red carpet with the wind. But another henchman charges enraged and delivers a swift dagger strike against the young man's chest. Then, the young man just observes the blade's approach and keeps his reflexes sharp in the combat. Then, with an extremely fast movement, he parries the rival's attack, using only his arm. At that moment, the hero slams the opponent against the ground with impressive physical force. With that, the adversary falls defeated with a groan of pain, unable to stand up from the sand. But the dark-haired boy spins his metallic staff and creates a shockwave that startles the other guards. Then the leader of the outlaws charges furious and brands his sharp knife to avenge his companions. Then the young man blocks the rival's blade, masterfully, and generates bright sparks through the dark alley. At that moment, the opponent retreats, startled upon noticing that his charge was blocked with ease. With that, the hero focuses his golden gaze and prepares to deliver the finishing blow in the combat. But the young man applies a devastating counterattack that completely breaks his adversary's stance. Then the leader of the outlaws plummets, unconscious, into the dust, without the strength to continue the battle. Then the young master remains standing in the dark alley, surrounded by all the guards who fell. At that moment, the chat viewers lose it with joy and praise the incredible performance of his stream. With that, the survivor on his knees tries to retreat, startled in front of the young man's intimidating presence. But the hero holds him firmly and demands to know once and for all the boss's exact location. Then the dark-haired boy displays his sharpest gaze and shows that he is not playing around on that mission. Then the outlaw tries to resist, but is hit by a swift strike that makes him beg for his life. At that moment, the opponent shakes completely with fear upon realizing that he is facing a monster. With that, the hero repeats the question in a cold manner and demands the name of the street where the ruler is located. But the young man raises his blade to intimidate the rival and makes the chat laugh at that torture in the game. Then the guard points a trembling finger and reveals with difficulty that the target is on 13th Street. Then the man faints on the sidewalk while the dark-haired boy plans to invade the largest enemy base in the region. At that moment, the channel's followers comment and joke that the previous hero passed away for nothing. With that, the young man analyzes the training knife and complains in a lazy way that is too short. But the young master looks around for some better equipment left by the fallen adversaries. Then the warrior smiles upon spotting a massive iron pipe that seems perfect to use in the fights. So he uses the new heavy weapon to shatter the building's windows and initiates his dramatic intrusion. At that moment, the soldiers mobilize in a hurry down the stairs to try to stop the fierce intruder. With that, the young man spins the iron pipe with extreme mastery and applies heavy strikes to the opponents. But the hero leaps from above and delivers a devastating aerial attack that throws 3 rivals far away. Then the dark-haired boy lands softly on the red carpet after finalizing one more perfect combat sequence. Then, the young man walks calmly up the mansion staircases, which were left full of defeated soldiers. At that moment, he wipes the dust from his new iron pipe and maintains his usual pose of supremacy. With that, the dark-haired boy complains about the game's missions and finds it an exaggeration to have to fight 30 men all at once. But a booming voice echoes throughout the hall and congratulates the young man on his spectacular performance. Then a beam of blue light appears on the theater's ceiling and indicates the arrival of a dangerous new threat Then the young master focuses his vision on the sharp blade that was thrown quickly in his direction. At that moment, he dodges with superhuman reflexes, causing the dagger to hit the stone wall. Because of that, a bunch of magic swords begins to float around the hero, surrounding the entire place. Suddenly, dozens of sharp daggers start flying toward the young man, covering the entire space around him. Facing the dangerous attack, the protagonist stays calm and firmly grips his iron staff to defend himself. With impressive reflexes, the young man dodges and deflects the first projectiles coming his way. His rapid movements leave the chat viewers completely shocked by his absurd reaction speed. Right then, heavy footsteps echo through the hall, and the opponent praises the young man's performance, saying he is pretty good. However, the man flashes a cruel smile as he pulls out more sharp daggers to continue the fight. The terrible boss, Drake, officially introduces himself and mockingly asks if the young man will be able to deflect his next attack too. With that, the villain makes a swift move and throws highly dangerous dark chains toward the hero. Along with the chains, a literal rain of lethal daggers is unleashed at high speed against the young man. While the chat comments in despair about the boss's insane attack patterns, the protagonist stands still, bracing for impact. Then, the young man spins his iron pipe so quickly that it creates a perfect spinning shield to block the onslaught. The young man continues to masterfully defend against every single lethal projectile trying to hit him. The sound of clashing metal echoes intensely through the hall as the villain's weapons are deflected one after another. Because of this, all of the boss's daggers end up being deflected, getting stuck uselessly all over the wooden floor. The shock of the attack leaves the villain, Drake, surprised and with a tiny scratch on his face, making the stream chat go absolutely wild. At that, the protagonist gives a confident smile while the viewers debate if there is anything in this game that this young man cannot defend against. Quite impressed by what he just witnessed, Drake smiles and asks for the young warrior's name. The young man answers directly that his name is nameless, leaving the viewers surprised to see the boss so shaken that he actually asked for an opponent's name. The villain accepts the name with respect, stating that strong warriors deserve to be treated with proper consideration. But right after, Drake draws his giant sword and warns that, because of this, he will fight with all his might from now on. Then we see the game's transition screen, indicating that the real battle is about to truly begin. Suddenly, one of the boss's spear-tipped chains advances stealthily and swiftly toward the hero. The protagonist reacts just in time and blocks the tricky attack using his metal staff. Right after, another sharp tip grazes past, dangerously close to his head. Even so, the young man manages to dodge and repel yet another strike from the chains with extreme agility. The young man performs impressive acrobatic maneuvers in mid-air to escape several chains trying to trap him at the same time. He realizes that the fight has become much more complex now and that this opponent is far more dangerous than ordinary enemies. The protagonist's gaze becomes completely focused as he tries to analyze his rival's movements amidst the chaos. The young man notices that these chains are the exact reason why no other player has managed to defeat this boss until today. At that, the hero reflects on how the developers really went all out on the combat system for a simple elimination game, while the chat agrees that the battles have always been the game's strongest point. Seeing that the protagonist is purely on the defensive, Drake taunts him, asking if he is ever going to attack. Without wasting any time, the villain charges furiously at the young man to end the confrontation once and for all. The two exchange violent strikes, and the boss's giant sword clashes hard against the young man's metal pipe, generating bright sparks. Drake keeps pressing forward with heavy blows, while the young man uses all his skill just to stay on his feet and block the onslaught. At that moment, the protagonist looks up and notices another heavy vertical attack coming right at him. The hero quickly leaps backward to escape the powerful strike, which destroys the ground where he was just standing. While the viewers complain that it is impossible to beat this combo and that using just a pipe was arrogant of the young man, he admits to himself that this fight is harder than facing 13 opponents at the same time. However, The protagonist remembers that he has survived much worse challenges in the past and knows exactly where the opening he needs is. With that in mind, the young man charges forward, with everything he has to break the villain's defense and close the distance between them. But Drake notices his approach and yells, asking if the young man really thought it would be that easy. The villain releases a dark energy, claiming he would never give such an obvious opening to his opponent. Their weapons clash again with extreme violence, creating a massive explosion of light that illuminates the entire hall. Drake grinds his teeth in annoyance, realizing that his devastating strike was blocked yet again. The protagonist knows that his counter-attack technique defeats ordinary enemies instantly, but against a boss like Drake, it only serves to create space for a single blow. To make matters worse, the red chains constantly protect the villain's body, making it almost impossible to land a clean hit on him. However, the hero flashes a confident smile, thinking that none of these difficult rules apply to him. After all, the young man is completely certain that he can deliver a perfect, precise strike to get past that barrier. The young man remembers all the tens of thousands of times he repeatedly practiced the exact same stance with his sword. He visualizes the basic rulus, planting his feet firmly on the ground, drawing power from the base of his body, and keeping his guard up high. Channeling the image of a legendary master swordsman, the protagonist raises his metal staff and assumes the perfect stance to deliver his final blow. At that moment, the young man channels all his energy to deliver a devastating counter-attack against his opponent. With extreme precision, the strike hits Drake directly in the head, making him cry out in pain from the violent impact. A massive pillar of crushing energy falls upon the stage, destroying everything around it with devastating force. The chat reacts in shock at how easy the victory looked, while the young man reflects on controlling a new virtual body. The system analyzes the perfect footwork performed by the player to ensure a solid base in combat. Next, the simulation shows the ideal torso rotation calculated to maximize the physical power of the strike. Even the millimeter-precise curvature of the arm was flawlessly executed by the protagonist during the attack. Every single movement made by the young man was perfectly synchronized to achieve the most efficient stance possible in the game. The young man smiles slightly, realizing that even in a different body, his legendary technique brings the exact same result. Just then, he notices a new onslaught coming his way and spins around quickly with a focused, sharp gaze. A huge wave of dark power is released throughout the hall as the warriors continue to exchange heavy attacks. Drake reappears completely furious and battered, shouting insults at the young man. Because of the humiliation, the leader of the assassins orders the young man's downfall while throwing all of his lethal chains at once. With extreme mastery, the protagonist dodges and deflects every single chain, trying to pierce his body. The chat comments, deeply impressed, that none of the rivals' attacks can hit the hero twice in a row during combat. At that, the young man advances with firm steps through the ruined hall, preparing to end the confrontation for good. He finds this battle very entertaining and feels that moving his weapon is the only proof of his former real life. The protagonist shows a genuine smile as he remembers his origins while deflecting his opponent's attack. A devastating boom occurs as the two forces collide, generating a massive explosion of reddish light. Upon impact, Drake's weapons are completely snapped in half and fly away, embedding themselves straight into the carpet. Drake drops to his knees, completely defeated, while the hero raises his staff to deliver the final, deciding blow. A massive beam of red energy hits the villain, finishing the epic battle with spectacular power. Drake's body drops to the cracked floor as his health bar is completely depleted by the system. The panel indicates victory over the boss, and the chat goes absolutely wild, declaring that the hero Nameless is a true god. The protagonist expresses his gratitude for the generous donation he just received from one of his enthusiastic new fans on the live stream. But the young man is very surprised to notice that the number of concurrent viewers on the stream suddenly spiked. The scene shows the troops' theater, where the hero makes his escape by gracefully leaping through the building's window. He is still trying to understand how he managed to attract so many people to watch his gameplay in such a short amount of time. The young man notes with intrigue that the live view count has already surpassed even his total number of followers. The protagonist stares at the system screen thoughtfully, trying to process all this sudden buzz. Because of this, the young man blushes slightly, feeling a bit embarrassed by all the attention he is receiving from his new viewers. He recalls the advice to always do his best, even if there were only a single person watching his stream. Even though he is shy, the young master admits to himself that the feeling of being recognized is extremely pleasant. The chat comments keep praising his skills, saying the young man plays at a completely different level. A fan sends another donation, saying they got goosebumps watching the villain get taken down with just an iron pipe. The protagonist thanks the viewer for the financial support, while the chat debates the absurd damage of the attack. With that, the young man walks calmly down the ruined staircases, but an intriguing question pops into his mind. He wonders why the city guards haven't shown up yet to put a stop to all that massive chaos. The chat hilariously explains that the kingdom's soldiers are terrified of assassins and never show up at crime scenes. Users joke around, saying that patrols only appear when a player tries to steal coins from some pedestrian. The hero decides to leave the area, and the game screen officially transitions to the start of a new chapter in the journey. The young man walks calmly through the city's beautiful cobblestone streets as the sun begins to set on the distant horizon. Suddenly, a mysterious voice calls out the protagonist's name, making the young man stop and pay close attention. He slowly turns around in the golden alleyway, bathed by the sunset, to find out who is calling out to him there. The young man looks toward the horizon with curiosity, wondering who the unknown person addressing him on the street could be. A mysterious figure dressed in a dark hood slowly approaches under the sunset light on the sidewalk. The young woman reveals her face, showing herself to be Christina, who came to congratulate him on defeating the terrible villain, Drake. She holds out her hand, gripping a sack of coins, and thanks the young man for helping them take a step toward freedom. With a sincere look, the beautiful blonde expresses all her immense gratitude for the young warrior's heroic deed right there. She hands over the generous reward to the hero, while the system notifies him that his reputation in the region has significantly increased. The young man realizes he received the payment even without finalizing an official contract, and thinks to himself that he doesn't really need the money. The chat jokes that the hero only uses iron pipes and imagines the villain's frustration over being defeated for nothing. Christina subtly asks what his next destination will be, but the young man prefers to leave a sense of mystery in the air. The young woman simply offers a beautiful smile, calmly agreeing with the mysterious answer given by the hero. Next, she says a friendly goodbye to Nameless and begins to walk toward the beautiful sunset. The protagonist remains motionless on the sidewalk, silently watching the young woman's departure under the golden evening sky. The young man decides to turn around and focus on his next steps as the city sky slowly begins to darken. The chat debates whether that violent raid can truly be considered an ideal, stealthy assassin job. At that, the viewers laugh at his boldness, and the young man decides that this is the best time to end today's live stream. The young man announces that he has already completed all the match objectives and says a cute goodbye, while the chat begs him to stay. The followers try to keep the protagonist on the stream, sending desperate messages for him to keep playing for a bit longer. But the hero simply wishes everyone a good rest and disconnects, leaving his audience lamenting in the comments section. The screen displays the stream ended message while all the game data is properly saved on the virtual server. The young man slowly opens his eyes, back in the real world after going through an extremely intense virtual experience in the game. The young man opens the simulation capsule and stretches, exhausted after successfully finishing another tiring day of online battles. But he gets a start when he notices that his roommate is lying calmly on his bed, messing around on his phone. Intrigued, the protagonist seriously questions why his friend is there, relaxing in his own room at that hour. The companion reveals that he was off today and decided to watch the entire stream, praising the young man's incredible performance. The friend makes a freeloading joke about their space, and the scene displays a small, playful illustration about the two of them bickering. Moments later, the friend appears defeated on the floor, and the hero asks what people are commenting about his match. The young man on the floor checks his device's screen and mentions that the chat was extremely buzzing, even though the audience is still small. Losing his patience, the protagonist snatches the phone from his companion's hand to read the comments with his own eyes. On the phone, he watches the recording and checks out his incredible dodge play against the feared boss, Drake, in the theater. The post highlights the exact moment he threw his opponent off balance, preventing any physical reaction from him. Several online discussion forums are debating the identity of the mysterious player and the rare item he managed to win. The protagonist analyzes the online threads, but notices that nobody has concrete information about the item received in the fight. He wonders if the mysterious fragment might be an exclusive reward given only to those who play in an aggressive style. Then, he reads a comment from a hater criticizing how dramatic people are being, getting so hyped over an unknown streamer. His companion consoles him, humorously pointing out that the presence of haters is just a natural consequence of success. The young man becomes thoughtful, reflecting that all that positive attention from people truly brings a very satisfying feeling. But he asks what he should do when the negativity starts, and his friend reminds him that he already has hundreds of followers. The friend gets up excitedly, revealing that there are thousands of new users commenting and theorizing about his plays. The protagonist reflects in silence on his friend's suggestion that he needs to become even more famous on the internet. He wonders how he would do that when, suddenly, his computer screen begins to flash intensely with a blue glow. The young man checks the new messages on the game's official page, which are talking about a famous streamer attempting an insane challenge. The protagonist reads the posts and gets totally confused upon noticing that everyone is commenting about an alpaca in the game. He opens a highlight video where a player swears in front of everyone that he will keep playing until he manages to beat Drake. Remembering that the player publicly doubted his victory against the boss, the hero flashes a very sarcastic smile in the room. Lying back on the bed, the roommate lets out a surprised exclamation upon seeing the protagonist suddenly approach him with intensity. The young man asks if his friend knows the famous player Alpaca, and he confirms it, saying he has already done several partnerships with him. With a rather mischievous side smile, the protagonist declares that he is going to need a small favor from his companion. The scene changes, revealing a beautiful, sunny grassy field inside the virtual server, where the adventures continue to take place. The famous player Alpaca collapses tiredly onto the green grass, lamenting yet another frustrating defeat against the game's forces. The system indicates that the young man failed on his 13th attempt at the challenge, and the chat begins to mock his gameplay. The player sighs in annoyance at the audience's petness, thinking he should have used his reputation to make the fight easier. Suddenly, he hears a mysterious sound coming from behind the trees in the scenery and turns around with a confused, startled look. A beautiful, cute white, furred alpaca named Dayback appears at the spot, revealing itself to be the official mascot given by the fans. Deeply touched, Alpaca tries to get closer to the beloved animal, thinking the mascot just came to bring him good luck in battle. But the moment he tries to talk to Dayback, the animal simply spits with full force right into the poor young man's face. The chat has a blast laughing nonstop at the humiliation, while the depressed player grumbles that he will never get used to that. The blonde young man gets quite irritated by the mockery and complains, saying he isn't there to play games inside the game, but he gets startled by a new donation saying that a mysterious user actually managed to defeat the dangerous Drake. At that, the chat viewers send a link for the player to check out the video of the alleged victory against the terrible boss. The young man thinks it's all just a big fake created to trick him and claims he won't fall for that chat trap. Upon clicking the post, he sees the official video where the hero Nameless achieves the unprecedented feat of clearing the entire mansion. The young man enters a state of despair and begins to break out in a cold sweat, realizing that the mysterious player truly won the impossible fight. He reads the player name Nameless on the device's screen and is left totally perplexed by the existence of such a strong warrior. Suddenly, a private message notification pops up, flying right in front of the young man's screen, startling him mid-game. The young man catches his breath after the sudden scare and wonders curiously what that mysterious letter could be. He opens the virtual envelope, and his eyes widen as he reads the first words from the mysterious sender who contacted him. The message was sent by Nameless's friend, who apologizes for the intrusion and asks if Alpaca would have a little time to talk. The scene changes, revealing the immense building of the development headquarters of the company that manages this entire virtual game universe. Inside the executive director's office, we see a hand calmly stirring a cup of hot coffee to relax. The company president takes a sip of the hot beverage, showing a look of absolute peace and satisfaction in his room. He praises the coffee's pleasant aroma, but his moment of peace is suddenly interrupted when the door is swung open by surprise. An employee comes running in, desperately shouting, making the president jump and spit out all the beverage he was drinking. The irritated boss wipes his face, asking if he doesn't know how to knock on the door before entering, and demands to know the reason for all that panic. The startled young man reveals that one of the most feared and important rulers in the game was just completely defeated. He adds that the victory was a perfect, total clear, leaving the president shocked by the information. The president gulps and seriously asks the employee which of the kingdom's powerful rulers was the one defeated. Upon learning it was Drake, the boss just smiles in relief, while the game's other deities mock Drake for being the weakest one. The president shrugs calmly, stating that it was about time someone put an end to that annoying opponent. But the employee worries that people might discover the rare fragment of order, which could ruin their plans. The colleague recalls that the president himself designed the entire game system specifically to prevent this from happening. The panel reveals the fragment of order as a hidden item that can only be obtained by defeating a ruler through a specific route. The lore explains that this reward requires defeating the boss in aggressive mode, but some rivals cannot be beaten without a certain skill. Many players end up crying because they cannot get the necessary technique, which requires a long path of achievements. The secret skill was designed by the developers so that users would take a very long time before managing to unlock it. The system even displays warnings telling tired players to go get some rest after spending over 100 hours trying to get the technique. The president checks the new forum threads, where everyone is complaining about the insane difficulty to unlock this special power. Given this, the boss relaxes, knowing that for now, they don't need to worry about the secret being discovered. But the employee alerts him that a streamer who is live just accomplished this feat, leaving the boss suspicious. The president abruptly interrupts the conversation upon noticing a rather strange detail in his employee's words right there. He questions how the young man knew about the live stream, suspecting that the employee was watching streams during work hours. The boss yells furiously, warning that he will cut his salary, while the young man runs away crying, begging him not to do that. The president mutters angrily, wondering how many times that lazy employee is going to keep rewatching the exact same video. He goes back to staring at his computer screen, hoping that players will never manage to gather all the rare fragments. The scene changes and reveals the announcement of a major special collaboration event among the server's most influential players. In the apartment, the young man named Suhan asks if the joint stream is truly scheduled to happen today. Han checks the community post and questions if Alpaca is really going to go through with the live stream alongside the newcomer, Nameless. But the streamer looks at his companion seriously and states that he is understanding the whole situation completely wrong. The young man clenches his fist with determination, explaining that the newcomer won't participate in the stream just as any ordinary guest. The panel displays a luxurious gaming chair with a golden crown, reserved especially for the master of that stream. He raises his hands dramatically, declaring that Nameless was invited to the event with the honorable position of Supreme Master. Han thinks it's absurd to call a newcomer a master and reminds him that the young man started streaming just a very few days ago. But his friend just gets annoyed, saying he only cares about the professional league and considers the rest of the content to be garbage. Han sighs and asks if he can lend his colleague's backup simulation capsule for the hero to use when he arrives. He rejects the idea instantly and angrily, claiming that the equipment is far too expensive to be used by just some stranger. The companion just shrugs and notes that he will be in his room watching the event, telling him to call him when the hero arrives. The streamer is left alone staring at his phone screen and complains that his friend has been very grumpy and different lately. The young man realizes that Nameless completed the challenge without even having a proper simulation capsule and becomes thoughtful. He begins to imagine if the protagonist might actually be some kind of extremely dangerous, real-life mobster. Regret hits him for proposing this collaboration, and he leaves the police number dialed just for safety. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, startling the young man, and a polite voice from outside says it's a pleasure to meet him there. The young man opens the house door and stands completely paralyzed with surprise upon seeing who just arrived at the place. The visitor formally introduces himself as Jin Seo Jun while flashing an amiable, friendly smile at the entrance. The host is shocked to notice that the young man is even more handsome in person than his own virtual avatar. He enters a state of comical despair, thinking it's unfair for the guy to be so naturally handsome without needing in-game edits. At that, Wu appears behind his friend, waving cheerfully, while Seo Jun playfully pushes him out of the way. Alpaca invites everyone inside, and the hero takes the opportunity to observe the details of his colleague's luxurious residence. From the outside, it looked like a pretty ordinary house, but inside, the place displays a modern, elegant custom kitchen. The young man notices that his friend knows perfectly how to separate his personal life from his professional work as a streamer. He admires the studio, and the host offers to make some coffee while Wu runs to help out in the kitchen. The two begin to banter in a friendly way, and Seo Jun notices that the friends manage to bond very quickly. Suddenly, the living room door opens, revealing the arrival of yet another person in the apartment, making the hero alert. The newcomer shows a serious expression and greets the protagonist in a very polite, formal manner in the room. He introduces himself as Han, the channel manager, and the hero reveals his real name, Jin Seo Jun. To the young man, the two exchange a firm handshake while staring fixedly at each other, trying to gauge each other's strength right there. Seo Jun feels a slight tension in the air and wonders if the other young man is trying to compete for dominance with that gesture. Han praises the hero's gameplay but comments that he heard rumors that his synchronization rate is very low. The young man confirms the information, and his companion questions the fact that he only returned to playing a short time ago. Jin Seo Jun smiles and reveals a small secret, that he actually played professionally in the game's league 7 years ago. The revelation that the hero used to play professionally so long ago leaves Alpaca completely shocked and speechless. Han asks in astonishment what the hero's rank was back then, and Seo Jun calmly answers that it was silver. The companion is suspicious of the answer, claiming that nobody gets that strong all of a sudden after spending so many years away. With that, he challenges the protagonist to a direct fight in the game's testing arena to evaluate his skills. Alpaca tries to intervene, worried about the dispute, but Han insists, saying he wants to test the young man's power personally. Wu eats some snacks calmly and ironically questions if his colleague really wants to face this young man. The friend laughs and warns open-mindedly that challenging Seo Jun to a fight is actually a terrible idea for him. Han gets visibly annoyed by the mockery and questions if his friend really thinks he would be defeated in the arena. Wu explains that the problem isn't just losing, but rather the absurd level of humiliation he is going to suffer there. The hero just shrugs calmly, not caring about the minor argument happening right in front of him. Then Wu asks for absolute secrecy and decides to reveal the true identity of a legendary player to his colleagues. He shows his phone and advises Han to challenge the feared level 10 boss if he really wants to get attention. The friends start breaking out in a cold sweat and panic as they realize who the true person behind that account is. They finally discover that the hero Nameless is actually the legendary player known in the game as Unknown. The phone displays the classic video of Unknown deflecting strikes with superhuman speed against the testing robot. The recording shows the devastating impact of the weapons clashing in a frantic, perfect manner without missing a single move. The opponent's defense is completely shattered by the brutal sequence of attacks delivered by the mysterious hero. The young men watch the video and are left completely terrified as they witness Seo, Jun's insane level of power. Han becomes fascinated by Unknown's genius tactics, while the protagonist calmly eats cookies on the couch. The video shows that the match was totally one-sided and that the warrior perfectly blocked all of his rival's strikes. The screen highlights Unknown's famous phrase, telling his rival to go train for another 80 years if he wants to beat him one day. Alpaca flips out, saying the phrase is just too amazing, and admits he got nervous about the collaboration he's about to do with him. Han remains in silence, head down, with an extremely mysterious, thoughtful expression in front of his colleagues. Suddenly, the companion calls out Seo, Jun's name, in a solemn way, making the protagonist look at him curiously. He walks slowly until he stops right in front of the hero, maintaining a totally firm and determined stance. The young man takes a deep breath and declares with extreme seriousness that from this exact moment on, things are going to change here. Alpaca and Tae Woo panic, thinking their companion is going to start trouble, and quickly try to hold him back. But Han surprises everyone by bowing, lowering himself to the floor to declare that the hero is his new master. The young men celebrate in relief, realizing that the great tension of the confrontation was finally completely dissolved. The hero is left completely confused, not knowing how to react to the young man's sudden change in behavior. The manager declares that he respects anyone who plays well and insists that the protagonist treat him like a brother from now on. The hero accepts the respect but thinks to himself that based on his real age, he should be treated like an elder, not a brother. Tae Woo finds that scene hilarious and starts laughing at his colleague, who changed his attitude so quickly in front of the master. Alpaca starts mocking his colleague, crawling on the floor laughing at the silly face he's making after learning the truth. The host becomes thoughtful, trying to remember if Jun could be the exact same professional player from 7 years ago. The protagonist shows a thoughtful expression while his colleagues continue to joke around and have fun around him. The manager calls his partner's attention, warning him that he needs to focus because their stream is going to start soon. He warns that the live stream time is approaching while the friends continue enjoying a lighthearted moment in the living room. The host notices the time and rushes to get ready for the special event that is about to begin. He tries to calm down, thinking he is just imagining too many things about the protagonist's secret identity. The young man invites Jun to head over to the capsule area, and the hero accepts the invitation in a calm, direct manner. The manager pushes his partner with all his might, offering his own advanced capsule for the hero to use without hesitation. He shoves his partner away in a comical manner, sparking outrage from his colleague, who gets extremely mad at the unfair treatment. The stream is finally started, and thousands of viewers begin to enter the room to follow the big event. The friends watch from the outside via the monitor, while the chat scrolls rapidly, demanding to see the guests' gameplay. The host acts dramatically, pretending to cry upon noticing that almost nobody there joined the live stream just to see his gameplay. The young man pretends to wipe away tears of emotion upon reading a message from a loyal fan who says they are there to support him. He celebrates excitedly in his chibi version, thinking he finally found a viewer who actually likes him. But his smile vanishes upon reading that the person only wants to watch the stream to see if he will keep his promise to win. The young man gets irritated by the banter and threatens to ban the playful viewer on the spot, drawing laughs from his audience. He answers confidently that the promise won't be fulfilled today because they are going to take on an innovative challenge. The host displays an expression of total enthusiasm as he announces to the public what the focus of today's video will be. He declares with lots of energy that they will perform an aggressive stage clear, making the chat go wild with the announcement. The young man sets up the scene and warns that he is going to introduce the Supreme Master, who will teach the secret fighting technique today. The chat reacts with applause and jokes while a wooden box is smashed to mark a grand entrance. The spotlight focuses on an empty wooden bench, and the host calls out the hero's name, inviting him to come up to the stage. But the stage remains empty, generating a rather awkward silence on the set and leaving the young man very confused. The viewers start to ask what happened, and for what reason the star guest hasn't appeared on the live stream yet. The chat starts to mock him, saying the young man was tricked, and he panics, wondering if there was some kind of issue. The host checks his phone and almost passes out from shock upon reading the message from Jin Seo, Jun's friend that just arrived. A private message notification appears on the screen, indicating that the hero is facing a small difficulty. The image shows the application interface, where the invitation to join the game server was sent directly. The system tries to establish the audio and video connection between the players' accounts to start the joint event. The group of friends watches in panic at Seo, Jun's message, revealing that he doesn't know how to enter the game lobby. The chat finds that situation way too comical and starts laughing at the legendary hero who is lost in the game's main menu. The host has to guide the protagonist through the map's wasteland, hilariously holding his hand to help him log in. The hero finally manages to enter the room and politely apologizes for being late at the start of the event. Alpaca tries to hide his embarrassment by laughing and comments in a friendly manner that it's fine, since he's still a newcomer to the game. But the followers start sending jokes, roasting the host for being taught by a lost beginner player. The chat remains in an absolute frenzy, and the number of live viewers climbs rapidly in an impressive way on the platform. The audience mocks the host, saying he spent money on an expensive capsule just to lose to a rookie player. The young man makes an exhausted expression, commenting that teasing the streamer is part of his channel's daily entertainment. The lore explains that each chat's culture reflects the streamer, with some maintaining total control and others being free reign. The host calmly admits that he prefers this more loose and relaxed atmosphere in his live broadcasts. The chat keeps sending jokes about the young man's lack of skill while Jin Seo, Jun just observes in silence. The young man claps his hands energetically, deciding to change the subject once and for all to focus on what truly matters. He thanks Seo, Jun for defeating the villain Drake, making the progress of his own mission on the game server much easier. Suddenly, a new playful donation pops up that irritates him, and the young man points an angry finger, telling the fan to shut up on stream. The host complains to the hero, saying he shouldn't be laughing since he was the one responsible for all that tremendous mess. Jin Seo, Jun agrees with a smile and admits that he truly feels a small share of guilt for winning the boss battle. He jokes around, saying he never could have imagined a player would declare the challenge impossible on his very second day of gameplay. Alpaca is left speechless by the banter, and the chat starts making fun of him, saying he brought this hilarious situation on himself. The young man observes the protagonist, surprised to notice that he is surprisingly bold and easygoing with his words. He notices that even with thousands of viewers on the stream, the hero shows no nervousness and seems to be having fun. The young man decides to relax and begs the hero to help him pass the stage, calling the protagonist a true professor. The hero promises to do his best, and Alpaca celebrates, announcing that they have prepared 2 major attractions for today's live stream. He explains that the first part will be a direct mentorship inside the game, where the master will guide him on the path to victory. The host says that the second plan is a secret and takes the opportunity to ask what the hero's special skills are. The protagonist reveals that he hasn't allocated his skill points, leaving his colleague in shock at the absurd revelation. Alpaca questions in outrage who in their right mind decides to play empty-handed and without using any special powers nowadays. Seo, Jun scratches his cheek sheepishly, confessing that he has never used the game's techniques, and asks if they are actually mandatory. Alpaca gets very embarrassed because a really funny and ugly expression ends up on his face whenever he is flustered. The streamer wonders why Seo-jun didn't use the advanced simulator capsule, but the hero confesses that he actually didn't use it simply because he didn't know how to operate it. Seo-jun thinks that admitting this openly would make him look a bit pathetic, so he prefers to say confidently that he simply didn't need that equipment. Somehow, the stream chat starts commenting humorously on the protagonist's bold attitude in the game. Alpaca feels that the whole situation has completely turned against him since Seo-jun appeared, but decides to hang in there when he notices that the number of live viewers has risen to 25,000 people. He then gets his spirits back up and announces that the second activity planned with Seo-jun for the day is directly related to a very specific skill. The streamer shows a combat recording and asks if all the chat viewers have ever watched a video like that one before. In the clip shown, two fighters trade fast and precise strikes with their blades in the middle of an intense clash. During the frenzied combat, the opponent's weapon shatters completely, revealing the conditions of the secret weak point detection mission, which requires breaking 10 enemy weapons by hitting their structural flaw. Alpaca explains that this concept is like the weak points that appear in fantasy novels, where any object can be easily cut in half if it is hit in the exact spot. The streamer highlights that by finding and hitting 10 of these hidden structural flaws on different equipment, the coveted weak point detection skill will finally be unlocked. He makes a sign of 2 with his fingers and reveals to the audience that, up until that moment, only 2 of these hidden flaws have been discovered in the entire game. The first known structural flaw belongs to the foil that was accidentally broken in the video they just watched on the live stream. The second revealed flaw belongs to a longsword, whose weakness was discovered through a side quest with an in-game character. Faced with a fan's doubt about the effects of this power, Alpaca confesses that nobody knows what it actually does, since it is the last skill still unreleased on the server. But the streamer makes a serious and mysterious expression when mentioning the hidden rule behind the discovery of these weak points. He points excitedly at his colleague and triumphantly reveals to the chat that Seo-jun believes he has deciphered the secret rule on how to find these weaknesses. The viewers start sending dozens of messages doubting that absurd revelation, forcing the streamer to try to calm everyone's hype on the stream. Because of this great doubt from the public, Alpaca proposes that they make an official bet to see if the hero can find a new weak point on today's live stream. The streaming platform displays a shower of gold coins to illustrate the fun points system that the channel has for its viewers to use. These points, accumulated just by watching the live stream, can be exchanged for various fun interactive effects in the chat, or even for special requests to the streamer. Although they cannot be bought with real money, the true reason why viewers love collecting these points is very different and much more exciting. It is the channel's famous prediction system, where the audience can use their accumulated points to bet on various challenges proposed during gameplay. The streamer displays the betting options on the screen and tells the audience to take advantage of the available time to register their predictions strategically. Seo-jun observes the chat messages with a confused expression and silently wonders what these safe bets and long shot bets are that everyone is talking about. Alpaca explains in a friendly way that the safe bet has a high probability of happening but yields few points, while the long shot bet is extremely difficult to get right but guarantees a gigantic reward if it works out. The panel reveals that the vast majority of the audience prefers to bet on the safer option that the hero will find at most 1 or 2 structural flaws today. The hero concludes that the long shot bet of the day